and welcome back to Sewing from Scratch. I am Kate and this is where I teach you everything I know about sewing and we learn more together along the way. Today is an exciting one. It goes with a prompt from Shelf Sewing September for something you are excited about, sewing something you are excited about. I have been wanting to do these for a long time and I've been waiting. I'm like, oh, I'll wait till my sewing room is done. It just makes more sense. No, it doesn't. I'm just gonna do it now because I'm gonna show my sewing room some love. It's gonna make my practice more usable and it's just gonna make things a lot easier, I think. I'm hoping. So today we are sewing for the sewing room. We are going to make a wool pressing mat. We are going to make a thread catching bin and we're going to make a tailor's ham and sausage or sleeve roll. So we're going to do 4 of those things. The basket and the sleeve rolls and the ham, I will have linked below what patterns I'm using and we'll talk about them obviously. The pressing mat is all DIY. I have no idea what I'm doing. We are just gonna go with it. Okay, so first up we are going to make tailor's ham and sleeve roll or sausage, and this is a free pattern from Twig and Tail. So of course I will link that down below for you guys. This is a super easy one. It's just a couple of shapes and we just sew them together and stuff them. I'm going to be using sawdust because we have a construction business, so I have access to sawdust. This is what's recommended from Twig and Tail as the best option. If you don't have this, just use up some fabric scraps, and I think this is just gonna make my sewing pressing experience so much easier. I do have this that my husband made me for Christmas, and it helps. I use this a lot for corners and just for like pressing as well, but sometimes you just need the curve, right? I plan to use these pressing hams a lot. This is again the Twig and Tail free pattern from their website, and I'm using my projector as you can see here to cut out the pieces, and then once I have one cut I just use that as the template for the rest. I chose a linen for the liner and then wool for the outer, and I think normally this would be okay, except my husband told me that the dust we have is actually really fine because it's mostly MDF dust, so to use a really tight weave for the lining. So I wasn't sure that the linen would be enough, so I actually ended up adding in a muslin layer as well. So you can see here I have stitched together the original lining and the wool, and then I add the layer of muslin, cotton muslin on there just to be certain and just to kind of add a little bit of extra stability and hope that things don't leak out. So once I had them all put together, then I tried to use my pinking shears and I tried to use my rotary cutter to trim the edges, but I ended up just going in with my regular shears and cutting some notches, flipping them right sides out, and then stuffing them. So here I'm just sifting out that fine dust just so I can get the actual wood dust instead of the MDF dust. This was obviously a very messy job and done on a very windy day, so it wasn't all that enjoyable and I was very, very dirty when it was done. And after I had sifted all this out, I actually only had enough to fill the one ham. So you'll see that I use fabric scraps to do the other one. So it'll be good to compare the two. And you really want to make sure that you're packing it in there, shoving it down, and getting everything really nice and tight. And then I just stitched up the openings by hand. And word to the wise, if you are using sawdust, it is very, very dirty and it sticks to the wool. So I tried to vacuum it. It didn't vacuum that well. So I tried a lint roller and that didn't work that great either. So I think I'm just stuck with it like this. This is an excellent way to get rid of some fabric scraps. I mean, it doesn't take a lot, but it's still a good way to use up things you already have on hand. I'm just using a basic ladder invisible stitch to close these up. And rolling it out to kind of make it nice and smooth. And here's how they turned out. I decided to go with wool because that was recommended, and just to kind of keep things, you know, it keeps the heat and it just makes it nice for pressing. All right, next up we are going to do this adorable little thread catching bin here. This is a pattern I found on Pinterest, and I will link it down below. It is free. It's just a bunch of rectangles, and we're gonna make it now. So what we need is 2 pieces of fabric that are 10 by 8 inches and 2 pieces of batting that are 9 by 7 3/8 inches. I'm using just fleece here. Also need the main fabric, or what you're going to see the most of, and those are going to be 10-inch strips, and you need 2 that are 4.5 inches high. And then 2 that are 2 inches high. Then our little scrap pieces, we are going to make 4 pieces that are 1 3/4 inches by 2.5 inches. And then 14 pieces that are 1.5 inches by 2.5 inches. And make sure you keep these separate, it'll just make things easier. For the binding, it says to use a piece that's 2.5 inches by 19 inches. I'm actually just using regular double fold bias tape here. I think this one was about 2 inches. And then you're also going to need your lining fabric, which is 10 by 14 3/4. The first thing we're going to do is take our fleece and line it up on this bottom fabric piece, a 1/2 inch from the 2 sides and the bottom, and flush with the top. Then we're going to mark 1.5 inches down from the top and another 2.5 inches down from that line. You saw I'm using double-sided tape to keep everything together. If you have spray basting, that works too, or, you know, even nothing. And we're going to repeat this with the other pieces as well. Now it can be helpful to lay out what pattern you want your pieces to be in, what order, and just make sure you have those 4 wider pieces on the outer sides of both pieces. So we're going to start with a 1 3/4 inch wide piece, lay it down there, then lay a 1.5 inch piece on top and stitch all through all the layers at a 1/4 inch. Then you're going to add 6 more of the narrower strips and finish off that piece with a second 1 3/4 inch piece. I'm just pressing it carefully here, trying not to melt my fleece here. And then I'm going to repeat that with the second piece. So I will be left with 2 pieces that look like this. Now I'm going to take one of the narrower 10-inch strips and sew it down across the top there, and the wider one and sew it on the bottom. And again, I'm going to repeat with the second piece. Then I'm going to mark in some corners here that are 2 1/4 inch, so 2 1/4 inch squares. I'm also truing up the edges here just so I can kind of make sure that everything is exactly the same, and you'll see my very scientific way of transferring my markings there. Don't cut them out yet, we're going to quilt first. I did kind of a wave pattern and then some zigzags in between. And is it even sewing if you don't run out of bobbin thread? I found this was a great way to use up a bunch of my little bobbins. Now we can go ahead and cut out those pieces. I cut too far into mine and I had to kind of zigzag darn it back together. Next, lay those 2 pieces right sides together and sew that bottom seam. Press it open and top stitch on either side. Then lay them right sides together again, and we're going to stitch down the 2 side seams. We're using a 1/2 inch stitch here. Then you can open it up and line up that side seam with the bottom seam. This is how we're going to make our corner. And stitch across there. Trim the excess, and this part of the basket is complete. Now we're going to move on to our lining piece. So you're going to fold it together, right sides together, the long way, I guess you would call it, and then you're going to mark in your squares here. Now this is not symmetrical. So the one side going in from the side seam is 2 1/4 inches, but then going up from the bottom is 1 3/4 inches. Then you're going to sew those side seams, and then you can clip out those corners. Match up the side seam with the bottom pressed edge and make your corner there, and then stick it inside that outer basket piece. Line up the side seams or don't, and sew around that top edge. Then it's time to add the binding. So I'm just sewing as I go here. I'm not clipping it along. And and I'm stitching my binding on, and then I'm going to, once it's all attached, I'm going to flip it over and top stitch it down. And now my basket is complete. And here's how it turned out. Isn't she cute? This is just gonna add so much usability to my sewing room. Lastly, it's time to make our wool pressing mat. Now, if you've seen the ones in the stores, they are so expensive. I did not want to spend that, and I didn't think it was necessary. Honestly, I've just been using a towel on my makeshift counters here. Won't be doing that when I get my real counters, but for now it's fine. This is just a piece of melamine. It's fine. I don't want a big ironing board in here. I've been using just this counter and it's been working okay. So I'm just gonna attempt to make a wool pressing board, and I'm going to be using this felted wool that I have. This was from the thrift store, and this was from, I made a Camden cape. You saw it last year, or like earlier this year in the winter. And so I have some felted wool left over. I don't have a ton, but I'm hoping it's enough layers to make a decent size pressing mat. If you've seen these in the store, you know they are a lot of money. So I'm hoping to avoid that. And let's see how it turns out. So what I'm doing here is measuring my space to kind of see how big I want it to go. And then after measuring, I realized this is the same size as my cutting mat. So that's kind of what I went off as a guide. I was able to get 2 full pieces out of the wool, and then the gray fabric as well, which turns out isn't a wool. I melted on my iron, so I know it is not wool. Anyway, I was able to get 2 full pieces out of each of those fabrics, and then I was able to scrap together a 3rd piece of each of the fabrics. So you'll see in a bit here that I am kind of patchworking the wool together, and then also the gray, somewhat polyester type fabric to make a 3rd layer of each. So in total, I have 3 layers of the wool, 3 layers of the gray fabric, and then that makes 6 layers. And because that gray fabric was melting, I definitely did not want that anywhere near my iron. So I made sure that I kept those 3 pieces in the center of this pressing mat. If you have spray basting, it would be super helpful. I did not, and you'll see, like, once I have this all lined up nicely, I'm like, okay, time to go sew, and then I'm like, oh, how am I gonna get this over there and not have it shifting around? It's so bulky. So I did end up thread basting, which did work. Was it necessary? I don't know. I do have a walking foot built into my machine, and this fabric does want to stay together naturally, but I think it did help more than it hindered for sure. And you'll notice that I'm cutting with pinking shears. Again, not really necessary. I just wanted that little bit of extra detail on the edges. Now when it came to stitching it together, I just ran a stitch around all 4 sides, and because these weren't lined up perfectly and they weren't all exactly the same size, I kind of just went like 2 inches in from the edge and then cleaned it up after. It's not perfect, but it works, and it's so much better than just a bath towel. And here's how it turned out. You've seen it through the whole video, but I am super happy with how it turned out, and the only thing I'll say is that it does slide around a little bit, so I don't know if I'm going to put some Velcro underneath or just kind of deal with it as it is. So thank you so much for watching this video. Again, I'm just like so excited to do these projects and have them and use them, because why not? Why was I waiting? Like it just didn't make sense. I might as well do it. It's just another thing that was weighing on my mind, so let's just get it over with. And then I have something fun and useful, and it's just great, right? And if you make some of these, make sure you tag me on Instagram, and don't forget about Shelf Sewing September. The giveaways are so good this month, and I am so excited to bring you all these things that can help you to reduce some of your stash. So make sure you're tagging me, and you know, you don't even have to tag if you don't want to enter the giveaways, but I do like seeing what you post and what you're using and how you're using your stash and getting creative to maybe not purchase this month, because consumerism. That's another story for another day. But thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next video if you make sure you hit that subscribe button. Bye!